The perfect kill, or so she thought. Virus moved like a shadow through the cold metal corridors of Orion 9, a high-security human station floating in deep space. Her every step was calculated, every breath controlled. She was an elite assassin, trained to be silent, precise, and deadly. Her mission: eliminate Commander Jack Reynolds. The humans thought their station was impenetrable, but Virus had infiltrated much worse. The mission was supposed to be simple: get in, kill the target, and leave without a trace. She had done this 100 times before, and yet something felt off. Her sharp alien senses picked up the faint hum of security drones nearby, but she had memorized the patrol patterns. The guards were predictable. They always thought their technology made them safe. Virus smirked. She had disabled half of their systems before even stepping foot inside the station. Now she was one door away from completing her mission. Jack Reynolds was in his private quarters, unaware of the danger approaching. Virus touched her wrist device, activating a holo key that unlocked the door. With a faint hiss, it slid open. She stepped inside, her plasma blade humming softly in her grip. The room was dimly lit. A single desk, a bed, and a small screen flashing unread messages. No sound, no movement. Where was Reynolds? She stilled, her sharp eyes scanning every corner. Something wasn't right. Then, a voice cut through the silence. "You're late." Virus spun around, but it was already too late. A shadow moved fast, too fast for a human. A hand grabbed her wrist, twisting it hard. She gritted her teeth, dropping her blade as a solid fist slammed into her stomach. Pain shot through her body, but she didn't let it slow her down. She reacted instantly, using her momentum to flip backward, breaking free. Her hand reached for her second weapon, a small energy dart designed for silent kills. She threw it straight at Reynolds' heart. It should have killed him, but it didn't. The dart hit a glowing blue shield that flickered around his body for half a second before vanishing. Virus' eyes widened. A personal energy barrier. Humans didn't have that kind of tech. Reynolds smirked, stepping forward. He was taller than she expected, with a scar running down his left cheek and eyes that held too much experience. He wasn't panicked like most of her targets. He was ready. Virus lunged, striking fast, aiming for weak spots: the throat, the ribs, the knees. But Reynolds blocked every move, countering with just as much skill. "You've done this before," she muttered, circling him. Reynolds chuckled, wiping a bit of blood from his lip. "You could say that." Virus frowned. This wasn't right. Her targets were supposed to be helpless, caught off guard. They weren't supposed to fight back like this. Something was very, very wrong. Then, a sharp pain exploded in her side. Virus gasped, stumbling back as electricity surged through her body. She looked down to see a small metal dart embedded in her armor, a stun round. Her muscles locked up, and her vision blurred for half a second. She had been tricked. Reynolds moved fast, grabbing her arms and twisting them behind her back. Virus struggled, but the stun charge weakened her movements. She gritted her teeth. She wouldn't go down like this. "I knew you were coming," Reynolds whispered in her ear. "I've been waiting." Virus snarled, trying to break free. But then, the door burst open. Armed guards stormed inside, their weapons trained directly on her. She was trapped. Virus took a deep breath, calculating her options. No escape. No backup. No weapons. How had her mission gone so wrong? She glared at Reynolds. "You set me up." Reynolds smirked. "Took you long enough to figure that out." A sharp crack against her skull was the last thing she felt before everything went black. Enemies in a cage. A sharp pain throbbed in Virus's skull. Her vision was blurry, her body stiff. She blinked, trying to push past the haze clouding her mind. The last thing she remembered was fighting Reynolds, and then the impact of a stun baton against her skull. Now she was somewhere else. The cold metal beneath her fingers told her she was still on Orion 9. The dull hum of the station's life support systems droned in the background, steady but distant. Then she heard something that sent a rush of fury through her veins. Laughter. Her instincts kicked in, and she forced herself upright, muscles aching but functional. Across from her, sitting comfortably against the wall, was Commander Jack Reynolds. "You sleep like a rock," he said, stretching his arms behind his head. "I was starting to think you'd never wake up." Virus's eyes narrowed as she took in her surroundings. The room was small, reinforced steel walls on every side. A single metal door, no window, no visible security panel. The kind of cell meant for high-risk prisoners. Virus looked down at her wrists. No cuffs. They weren't treating her like a normal prisoner. Her gaze flicked back to Reynolds. Why was he in here with her? She slowly stood up, watching him carefully. He didn't seem concerned. If anything, he looked amused. "What is this?" Virus asked, voice low and sharp. Reynolds shrugged. "Your people betrayed you. Welcome to the club." Virus froze. She replayed his words in her head, making sure she hadn't misheard. Her people. Betray her? Impossible. Virus was an elite assassin, one of the best. If she had been captured, her handler would have arranged extraction, or at the very least, a cover-up. Instead, she was locked in a cell with her target. Something wasn't right. "You're lying," she said, stepping closer, ready to strike if needed. Reynolds smirked. "Am I?" Before she could respond, the station shook violently. A deep mechanical groan echoed through the walls. The lights flickered, once, twice, then dimmed, leaving only the dull red glow of emergency power. Virus tensed. That was not normal. Reynolds exhaled, rubbing the back of his head. "Yeah, that's not a good sign." Before Virus could demand answers, the alarm system blared, cutting through the silence. "Warning. Critical system failure DTTCTED. All PERSONEL. EVHEUATIMNEDA. Virus and Reynolds exchanged looks. And for the first time, she saw something new in his expression. Concern. Not just for himself. For her. The real threat reveals itself. The door to their cell slammed open. Virus moved instantly, ready to fight, until she realized there was no one there. No guards. No reinforcements. Just an empty hallway bathed in flickering red light. Reynolds stood, dusting himself off. "Well, looks like we're free." Virus didn't trust it. Something was wrong. Prison doors didn't just open during an emergency lockdown. Either someone wanted them out, or something had gone terribly wrong. She stepped out cautiously, her senses on high alert. The air smelled burnt. There was a faint metallic tang. Blood. Then she saw the first body. A station guard, slumped against the wall, eyes wide and unseeing. His chest had been torn open, ribs shattered, organs missing. Virus's stomach tightened. Reynolds crouched beside the body, studying the wounds. "Not a normal attack," he murmured. Virus knew that too. This wasn't a human kill. Then she heard it. A low, guttural clicking sound. Her assassin instincts kicked in immediately. She grabbed Reynolds by the collar and yanked him back just as a dark shape lunged from the shadows. A massive clawed limb slammed into the spot where he had just been standing. Virus and Reynolds spun around, facing their attacker. It was not human. Standing before them was a Cragnall, a monstrous alien. Its jet-black exoskeleton gleamed under the dim red lights. Its 4 elongated limbs twitched as it let out a deep guttural growl. Its razor-sharp mandibles snapped together, dripping with something dark. Virus immediately recognized it. A hunter. And it wasn't alone. Behind it, in the shadows, more eyes gleamed. A temporary truce. Reynolds swore under his breath. "Cragnall, here, you've got to be kidding me." Virus was already moving, calculating their chances. Low. No weapons, no armor, no escape route, and no choice. She turned to Reynolds. "We need to work together." Reynolds let out a humorless laugh. "Right, because trusting you has worked out great so far." Virus growled. "I don't have time for your human pride, Reynolds. Either we fight together, or we die apart." Reynolds hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But if you stab me in the back..." Virus smirked. "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead." The Cragnall charged. Virus and Reynolds moved as one. The fight for survival had begun. The real threat reveals itself. Virus moved first. Instinct, training, survival. She ducked low as the Cragnall lunged, its clawed limbs slicing through the air where her head had been a second ago. The wall behind her groaned, deep gashes left in the reinforced steel. Too close. Reynolds wasn't as fast. The alien beast swung again, and he barely dodged, stumbling back. Virus could already see it. He wasn't fast enough to fight these creatures. Not alone. The Cragnall clicked its mandibles together, a low, guttural sound, almost amused. Virus had seen this before. These creatures didn't just kill. They played with their prey. Reynolds swore under his breath. Any bright ideas? Virus's mind raced. She had fought Cragnall before. They were fast, strong, and nearly indestructible with their black exoskeleton armor. Their one weakness: the joints, the underbelly, soft tissue. But without weapons, their chances of survival were close to zero. She took a step back, scanning the corridor. They needed a bigger advantage. That's when she saw it. A power conduit, cracked and sparking near the ceiling. Virus grinned. "We need to move. Now." Reynolds didn't argue. They both bolted down the hall, the Cragnall shrieking in rage behind them. The beast chased them on all fours, its razor-like claws tearing into the metal floor as it ran. Fast, too fast. Virus leaped, grabbing onto a loose pipe and swinging herself upward. Reynolds did the same, barely pulling himself up before the Cragnall crashed into the wall below them. Snarling, Virus moved quickly, ripping off a loose power cable from the damaged conduit. The end sparked with raw energy. Reynolds saw what she was doing. "That's a terrible plan." Virus smirked. "Got a better one." He didn't. The Cragnall climbed up after them, hissing. Virus didn't wait. She shoved the sparking cable straight into its face. A high-pitched screech filled the air as electricity surged through its body, the creature spasming violently before it collapsed to the ground below. Its exoskeleton was strong, but not against direct energy discharges. Reynolds let out a breath. That worked. Virus hopped down beside the smoking quartz. "Don't sound so surprised." But before she could say anything else, the station shook again. The emergency lights flickered violently, and the distant sound of screaming echoed through the corridors. Virus turned sharply. That wasn't just one Cragnall. There were more. Nowhere is safe. Virus and Reynolds moved fast, running through the corridors. They passed more bodies: station guards, scientists, prisoners. Some had been torn apart, others left in twisted positions, as if they'd been hunted for sport. Reynolds clenched his jaw. Damn it, this was never about us. Virus glanced at him. "What do you mean?" He exhaled sharply. This station wasn't just a prison, it was a research facility. Virus frowned. That explained a lot. The Orion 9 station was too well guarded for a simple prison. But if they were running secret experiments, you were experimenting on the Cragnall. Reynolds nodded. They weren't supposed to escape. Virus let out a bitter laugh. And now they have. Reynolds grabbed her arm, forcing her to stop. "Listen, we're running out of time. The Cragnall aren't just here to kill. They're here to feed." Virus stiffened. She had heard the stories. The Cragnall didn't just slaughter their enemies. They consumed them, breaking down their DNA, using it to evolve. which meant every dead crew member was just making them stronger. She yanked her arm free. "Then we need to get off this station. Now." Reynolds nodded. "There's an escape route. But we're not the only ones who know about it." Virus narrowed her eyes. "Who else?" "Your people." The real betrayal. Virus didn't react at first. Then she turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Explain." Reynolds sighed. "You were set up. This wasn't just a mission gone wrong." Virus didn't want to believe it. She had trusted her handler, followed orders without question. But it made sense. No extraction team, no backup, no emergency protocol. They had left her here to die. Virus clenched her fists. "Why?" Reynolds held her gaze. "Because this was never about me." Virus stiffened. "They weren't trying to kill me," Reynolds continued. "They were using you as bait." The realization hit like a punch to the stomach. Her mission had never been to assassinate Reynolds. It had been to lure the Cragnell to the station. A test. Her people had deliberately sacrificed this entire station just to see what the Cragnell were capable of. Virus felt something burn in her chest, not just anger. Betrayal. She had always been a weapon, but now she understood. She was also expendable. Reynolds studied her carefully. "You didn't know." Virus exhaled slowly. "No, I didn't." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, the station rumbled again. Another explosion. Virus shook off the emotions. Right now, survival came first. "Where's this escape route?" she asked. Reynolds hesitated. "We have to reach the armory first. We need weapons." Virus nodded. "Then let's move." They took off down the hallway, leaving the bodies behind. But in the darkness, something else was moving too. Watching. Waiting. Hunting. Escape plan, but at what cost? Virus and Reynolds moved fast, their boots pounding against the metal floor as they ran through the dimly lit corridors. The station was falling apart. The walls groaned, the emergency lights flickered, and the distant sounds of screams and screeching metal echoed through the empty halls. The Cragnell were hunting. Virus's mind raced. Betrayed. Left to die. She had dedicated her life to the mission, to her people, to being the perfect weapon. And they had thrown her away like trash. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. Later. She would deal with this later. Right now, survival was all that mattered. Reynolds skidded to a stop near a heavy blast door. The armory. He quickly punched in an override code on the panel. Nothing happened. The screen flickered, flashing a lockdown INITIATED warning in red. Virus growled. "Can you hack it?" Reynolds shook his head. "Not from here. The system's fried." Another shudder ran through the station. The emergency lights flashed, and for a brief second, Virus saw something move in the distance. A dark figure, tall, inhuman, watching from the shadows. They were being stalked. Reynolds followed her gaze and cursed. "They're already here." Virus didn't hesitate. She grabbed a loose metal rod from the wreckage nearby and jammed it into the door's manual release. Sparks flew as she pushed with all her strength. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door groaned and slid open, just enough for them to squeeze through. Reynolds slipped inside first, grabbing a pulse rifle from the nearest rack. Virus followed, immediately arming herself with a compact plasma pistol and a serrated combat blade. Reynolds looked at her. "You good?" Virus checked the charge on her weapon and holstered the blade. "I'm ready." Then the door behind them exploded. Surrounded. Virus barely had time to react before two Cragnell surged through the smoke, their jet-black exoskeletons glistening in the flickering light. Reynolds fired first. 3 clean shots, but the Cragnell moved too fast, dodging the energy blasts with unnatural speed. Virus lunged low, slicing at the nearest creature's leg with her blade. It screeched as black fluid sprayed from the wound, but it wasn't enough. The second Cragnell swiped at her, forcing her to roll aside as its massive claws tore through the air. Reynolds tossed her a grenade. Use it. Virus caught it midair, flicked the charge to maximum, and threw it between them. A pulse explosion erupted, sending both creatures flying backward. The smoke cleared, revealing their broken, twitching bodies. Virus exhaled, gripping her weapon. We need to move. Now. Reynolds nodded. He tapped a command into his wrist console. A small holographic map of the station appeared, flashing with multiple red zones. Virus frowned. What are we looking at? Reynolds pointed. This is the hangar. There's a stealth ship docked in the restricted sector. It's our best shot at getting off this station. Virus studied the map. The hangar was on the far end of the station, meaning they'd have to go through several hot zones, filled with both Cragnell and security failsafes. Not ideal, but it was their only option. The hunt begins. They left the armory quickly, weapons at the ready. The halls were darker now, the station's power failing. Every few minutes, the lights flickered, revealing shadows moving along the walls. Virus felt the weight of being hunted. The Cragnell weren't attacking in waves anymore. They were studying them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Reynolds whispered, "They're learning." Virus gritted her teeth. "Then we move fast." They turned a corner and froze. Ahead of them, 6 Cragnell stood motionless, their heads tilted in unnatural angles, as if they were listening to something. Then, all at once, they turned and charged. Virus didn't hesitate. She fired first, aiming for their joints. 2 dropped instantly, screeching as their legs were blown apart. Reynolds covered her, sending a barrage of energy bolts at the incoming creatures. 1 Cragnell dodged and lunged at him, only to be met with Virus's blade to its throat. Blood sprayed as she twisted the blade, yanking it free before spinning into a kick that sent another creature crashing into the wall. Reynolds threw another grenade, blasting a hole in the corridor's ceiling. Chunks of debris collapsed, blocking the path behind them. A temporary solution, but enough to give them a head start. They ran. The final choice. The hangar bay was close. Virus could smell the fuel exhaust, hear the faint hum of docking clamps releasing. But as they approached, a new voice echoed over the station's comms. A voice Virus knew. "Virus, if you're hearing this, I assume you've figured it out by now." She stopped dead in her tracks. Reynolds glanced at her. "Who the hell is that?" Virus's jaw clenched. "My handler." The voice continued. "The mission was never to kill Reynolds. It was to get you here. The Cragnell are our real objective. You, unfortunately, are not part of the equation anymore. Asterisk asterisk. Virus felt something inside her snap. All this time, she had been a pawn. She had given everything for her people, her loyalty, her skills, her life. And now, they had discarded her. Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder. "Virus, we need to go. Now." Virus took a slow breath, gripping her blade. Her people had used her, but she wasn't going to let them win. She was going to burn their entire plan to the ground. She turned to Reynolds. Change of plans. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "I don't like the sound of that." Virus smirked. "We're not just escaping. We're taking the whole damn station down with us." Reynolds hesitated, then grinned. "Now that I can work with." The hangar doors loomed ahead. The final battle was about to begin. The double cross, or a second chance. Virus and Reynolds stood at the edge of the hangar bay, their weapons raised, their breathing steady despite the chaos surrounding them. The station groaned beneath their feet, the distant sound of explosions and screaming growing louder as the Cragnell ravaged what remained of Orion 9. The massive stealth ship stood before them, its sleek, black surface gleaming under the flickering emergency lights. It was their ticket off this doomed station. But Virus wasn't leaving yet. Not until she settled the score. Her handler's voice still echoed in her mind. The mission was never about Reynolds. The Cragnall are our real objective. You, unfortunately, are not part of the equation anymore. She gritted her teeth, gripping her plasma blade tightly. They had used her, abandoned her, left her to be slaughtered like a common pawn. But Virus was no pawn. She was the deadliest assassin in the sector, and she was about to remind them of that. Reynolds, standing beside her, reloaded his pulse rifle. So, how exactly do we take the station down without getting ourselves killed? Virus exhaled slowly, her mind calculating. The reactor core. If we overload it, the entire station will go up in flames. Reynolds gave her a sideways glance. That's insane. She smirked. I know. Before Reynolds could argue, a deep metallic groan echoed through the hangar bay. They both turned. The hangar doors began to open. Virus immediately tensed. No one on this station should have been alive to operate the doors. And then she saw them. A familiar enemy. A group of heavily armed elite operatives strode into the hangar. Their armor was sleek, polished, and marked with the insignia of Virus's former employers. Leading them was a man Virus knew all too well. Commander Cale Rowe, her former mentor, her handler, and the man who had just ordered her execution. Rowe's gaze settled on her with cold amusement. Virus. Still alive, I see. Virus tightened her grip on her blade. You should have sent more men if you wanted me dead. Rowe chuckled. Oh, we did. The Cragnall were supposed to finish the job, but it seems you're just as stubborn as ever. Reynolds stepped forward, gun raised. You must be the bastard in charge. Rowe barely spared him a glance. And you must be the human we used as bait. Virus tensed. What do you want, Rowe? Rowe took a slow step forward, the other operatives keeping their weapons trained on them. We're here for the ship. And for you. Asterisk, asterisk. Virus frowned. Why? You already betrayed me. What could you possibly want? Rowe's smirk faded. Because despite your failure, you've seen more than you were supposed to. You understand what's really at stake here. He gestured to the chaos beyond the hangar, where the Cragnall roamed freely. This isn't just about survival, Virus. This is about evolution, about power. The Cragnall are the future of warfare, and you just proved how valuable they are. Virus's stomach twisted. You set this whole thing up, just to test them. Rowe nodded, and you performed beautifully. Rage burned inside her. She had lost everything because of him. Reynolds stepped closer to her. You're not actually considering going with this guy, right? Virus turned to Rowe, her expression unreadable. You want me to come with you? Rowe smiled. Come back. Work for us again. We'll erase this mistake. Virus took a slow step forward. Rowe's soldiers didn't react. They weren't worried. They should have been. Because the moment she was close enough, Virus struck. The assassin's choice. Virus moved like lightning, her blade flashing as she slashed across Rowe's armor, severing the energy pack attached to his chest. Sparks flew. His eyes widened in shock. Virus. She didn't hesitate. She stabbed him through the stomach. The other operatives reacted instantly, opening fire. But Reynolds was already moving, diving for cover and returning fire with brutal precision. Virus yanked her blade free and kicked Rowe backward, sending him sprawling as she grabbed one of the fallen soldier's rifles. She and Reynolds fought back to back, gunning down the squad with cold efficiency. Explosions rocked the hangar as stray shots hit fuel lines, sending massive flames erupting into the air. The battle was pure chaos. Virus barely registered the bodies hitting the floor. She was locked on one thing. Rowe. He was crawling away, clutching his bleeding wound. Virus stalked toward him, her gun raised. You used me. You threw me away like I was nothing. Rowe coughed, his smirk barely visible through the pain. You're still just a weapon, Virus. She pressed the barrel against his forehead. Not anymore. And she pulled the trigger. Escape or revenge? Reynolds ran to the stealth ship's controls, starting the engines as Virus approached. He gave her a look. "You good?" Virus took a slow breath. "I am now." The hangar bay was collapsing around them, flames consuming everything. But before they could take off, a new warning blared over the station. "Warning! KRAGNAAL overload DTTT. Core breach imminent." Virus's eyes widened. She turned to Reynolds. "We didn't set the reactor to overload." Reynolds paled. "Then who the hell did?" A voice crackled over the ship's comms. "I did." Virus froze. The voice was distorted, alien, but familiar. One of the Cragnell was speaking to them. Virus's blood ran cold. The Cragnell weren't just killing. They were learning. Reynolds looked at her. "We need to go. Now." Virus hesitated for only a second. Then she slammed her fist on the launch controls. The stealth ship roared to life, lifting off just as the entire station began to collapse. They rocketed into space, leaving Orion 9 behind, just as it erupted in a massive explosion, consuming everything. Virus sat back, watching the burning wreckage disappear. She had survived. She had won. But something inside her told her this wasn't over. The Cragnell had spoken. And they weren't done yet. The ultimate betrayal. The stealth ship cut through the vast darkness of space, leaving the burning wreckage of Orion 9 behind. From the cockpit, Virus watched the dying station collapse in on itself, a final, chaotic graveyard for those who had been left behind. She should have felt relieved. Instead, all she felt was rage. Betrayed. Used. Hunted. And now, something worse. The Cragnell had spoken. They had learned. Virus leaned against the cockpit controls, staring out at the stars. Her grip tightened on the edge of the console. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about revenge. Behind her, Reynolds exhaled sharply. That was too close. Virus didn't answer. Reynolds glanced at her. "You okay?" She turned to face him, her eyes sharp. "No, and neither are you." Reynolds blinked. "Excuse me." Virus stepped forward, her plasma blade still clipped to her belt. The Cragnell spoke. "Reynolds, that means they're more than just mindless killers. They're adapting." Reynolds hesitated. "So?" Virus narrowed her eyes. "So how do you think they got into Orion 9 in the first place?" Reynolds frowned. "You think?" Virus nodded. "Someone let them in." And suddenly, the entire situation made sense. Her mission was never about killing Reynolds. It was about luring the Cragnell to the station for experimentation. The Cragnell weren't just attacking randomly. They had inside help. And that meant they weren't done yet. An unwanted transmission. Before Reynolds could respond, the ship's comms console lit up. "Incoming transmission." Reynolds tensed. "That's impossible. We're running in stealth mode." Virus moved quickly, activating the security scans. No known signal source. The message was coming from nowhere. The ship's comms crackled. Then, "Virus, you cannot run from us." Virus's blood ran cold. The voice was a mixture of human and something else, as if it had been learned, stitched together from voices stolen from the dead. Reynolds backed away from the console. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Virus swallowed. "They're in the system." The Cragnell weren't just monsters. They were evolving beyond the physical. They were learning to hack. Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered. The engine sputtered for a moment before stabilizing. Reynolds cursed. "They're trying to take control." Virus acted fast. She grabbed the manual override cables, yanking the ship off-grid before the Cragnell could seize control. The transmission cut off. Silence. Then Reynolds exhaled. "Okay, new problem. If they can do that, it means they're way more advanced than we thought." Virus's mind raced. "No, they're just getting started. A ghost from the past. The ship's navigation system rerouted itself automatically, flashing a new destination. Virus checked the coordinates, and her stomach tightened. This isn't random. Reynolds leaned over her shoulder. Where is it taking us? Virus stared at the screen. Sector 17X, the dead zone. Reynolds stiffened. There's nothing there. Just abandoned warships and wreckage from the old wars. Virus didn't blink. No, there's something else. Reynolds frowned. What? Virus turned to him, her expression dark. My old base. Reynolds's face dropped. Wait, your people had a base there. Virus nodded. It was classified. A black site. A place where we stored things we didn't want anyone to find. Reynolds's voice was sharp. Like what? Virus hesitated. Then she finally admitted the truth. Like the first Cragnall specimen ever captured. The origin of the nightmare. Reynolds swore. So you're telling me your people had one of these things long before they ever attacked humans? Virus nodded. Yes. And now, for some reason, they want me to go back there. Reynolds ran a hand through his hair. This just keeps getting worse. Virus clenched her fists. Whatever they're looking for, it's in that base. Reynolds sighed. Let me guess. You want to go check it out. Virus looked at him. If the Cragnall are leading us there, it means they think there's something worth finding. And I'm not about to let them have it. Reynolds groaned. This is a terrible idea. Virus smirked. You can stay here if you want. Reynolds scoffed. And missed the chance to see you blow something else up. No way. Virus turned back to the controls, setting their course for Sector 17X. Whatever was waiting for them there, it was the key to everything. And Virus was about to unlock the past. The dark arrival. The stealth ship slipped through space undetected, gliding toward the dead zone. As they approached, the wreckage of countless warships drifted around them, massive skeletal remains of battles fought long ago. And then, they saw it. The old base, a massive derelict structure, half buried in the remains of a destroyed cruiser. Virus's heart pounded. We're here. But then, the ship's scanners flashed red. Reynolds frowned. What the? Virus immediately understood. They weren't alone. In the shadows of the wreckage, something was waiting for them. Something old. Something hungry. And the moment they stepped inside, there would be no turning back. Survival or sacrifice. The stealth ship glided through the dead zone, weaving between the twisted wreckage of forgotten warships. The remains of a long-lost battle surrounded them, hollowed-out cruisers, shattered carriers, and the skeletal remains of massive battle stations. The only light came from the dim glow of their ship's control panel and the eerie reflections of distant stars bouncing off the debris. Virus's fingers hovered over the ship's controls, her jaw clenched. Every instinct told her that something was wrong. And then, the ship's scanners flashed red. Reynolds, watching the readout, swore under his breath. We've got company. Virus stared at the screen. Dozens of red blips. Ships. No, lifeboats. Each one drifting lifelessly in the graveyard of warships. Some were broken, cracked open from the inside. Others remained eerily intact. Reynolds frowned. Survivors. Virus didn't answer. She already knew the truth. No, they're not survivors. Reynolds exhaled. Then what the hell are they? Virus gripped her plasma blade. They're bait. And as she spoke, the first lifeboat moved. The forgotten horror. The movement was slow at first, barely perceptible. A single lifeboat shifted, then another. Their broken hulls groaned as something stirred within. Virus narrowed her eyes. She knew what this was, and she knew they were already too close. Then, without warning, the first lifeboat cracked open. A horrific shape emerged, crawling out into the void. It was Cragnall, but different. Its body was more human, its movements unnatural, its eyes glowing with intelligence. Reynolds took a sharp step back from the screen. That's That's not right. Virus's grip tightened. They've been waiting for us. More lifeboats burst open, revealing hybrid forms, twisted combinations of Cragnall and human remains. Their bodies were grotesque, their exoskeletons merged with old armor, and their faces still bore the remnants of their past lives. The first experiment. The original test subjects. Reynolds swore. Your people did this, didn't they? Virus swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. This was the reason her people had captured the first Cragnell all those years ago. Not to study them. To merge with them. And now those experiments had returned to finish the job. The final descent. Virus slammed the ship's thrusters into full reverse, trying to pull away from the graveyard. But it was too late. The hybrid Cragnell latched onto their hull, their claws tearing into the ship's exterior. Alarms blared. Pressure loss. Hull integrity compromised. Reynolds grabbed a rifle. We need to get off this ship. Now. Virus didn't argue. She yanked a manual override, forcing the ship into a controlled crash landing on the nearest wreck, her old base. As soon as the ship touched down, Virus and Reynolds burst out of the hatch, weapons drawn. They barely made it 5 steps before they saw it. The abandoned base, buried beneath a ruined dreadnought. Dark, silent, waiting. And beyond it, the hybrid Cragnell were already coming. Virus turned to Reynolds. We make a stand here. Reynolds nodded. You got a plan. Virus exhaled. Yeah, we either kill them all, or we make sure they never leave this place alive. Reynolds smirked. I was hoping you'd say that. Into the abyss. The base's entrance was half buried under wreckage, forcing Virus and Reynolds to climb down into the ruins. Inside, the walls were coated in old bloodstains, rusted consoles, and shattered containment pods. Virus touched a panel, and a flickering hologram activated. A voice crackled to life. Experiment log 023. Initial hybridization process successful. Subjects display enhanced cognitive functions and heightened aggression. However, containment has failed. Facility lockdown is engaged. Reynolds swore. They weren't just experimenting. They were trying to control them. Virus's throat tightened, and they failed. A sudden guttural growl echoed through the base. Virus and Reynolds spun around, just as the hybrids charged. The battle began. Virus moved like a phantom, her plasma blade slicing through exoskeletons and flesh alike. Reynolds covered her, firing precise shots at their weak spots, keeping them from swarming. But there were too many. One hybrid lunged at Reynolds, tackling him hard. He hit the ground, his rifle knocked loose. The creature's jagged mandibles snapped inches from his face. Virus didn't hesitate. She launched forward, plunging her blade into the hybrid's skull, yanking it free just as another charged from the side. She barely dodged, rolling back into a defensive stance. Reynolds grabbed his rifle, panting. We can't hold them off forever. Virus knew he was right, and that meant it was time for the final move. The last choice. Virus activated her wrist console. I'm setting the reactor to overload. Reynolds stared at her. Wait. What? Virus's fingers flew across the console. If we don't destroy this place, these things will evolve beyond anything we can handle. We can't let them leave. Reynolds' expression hardened. He hesitated for only a second, then nodded. Fine. But we better get out of here first. Virus set the countdown. 5 minutes. No turning back. The two of them fought their way back to the exit, dodging claws, leaping over debris, and cutting through anything that got in their way. As they reached the surface, their stealth ship lay in ruins, but the wreckage of another escape shuttle was nearby. Reynolds pointed. That's our ride. Virus didn't look back. She just ran.